I want to say a few words on this terrible event in Nova Scotia, this mass shooting. It's the worst in Canadian history, so it's going to be a dark day for that province, and I was going to say that community, those communities. There's several villages involved. So the information is known at the moment, and I don't intend to make this very long and very comprehensive. Its gunman was one Gabriel Wortman, who is a denturist, not a dentist, but a denturist. I assume that's someone who supplies the dentures for older people. 51 years old. He started off by killing his former girlfriend, excuse me, his former wife and her new boyfriend, and then they went on a rampage from the village of Portapique and ended in Enfield. This occurred on the night of, let me just get this right, the night of Saturday, half 11 p.m., and it ended Sunday morning. I didn't actually hear about this on the news. I was looking at the Wikipedia current events section as I periodically do, and it came up, and I thought, "Whoa, that's a big thing." And I looked it up, and there has been somewhat of a lack of coverage. It may have been on the initial news here, but I haven't seen it being covered on the BBC or CNN, at least not at the moment. Maybe it was initially. Uh, all the all the reports I've seen has been from YouTube videos and online sources. But it's a terrible event. 18 people killed. That surpasses the 1989 École Polytechnique massacre in Montreal. So the worst in modern Canadian history. One of the victims was a woman who was served with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, 23-year veteran. She was a mother of two, Heidi Stevenson, and it's kind of her image that's being used a lot in the reports about this. Very often, where there is massacre or tragedy, one victim in particular is kind of used as a personification of all the victims in a sense, and that's been the case here. Apparently, he was disguised as a police officer. I think there's a lot of similarities with this and the West Cumbria shootings here in the UK in 2010. On that occasion, it was a disgruntled taxi driver, and again he picked off people at random, and I believe he killed 12 people altogether. That was our last large-scale mass shooting 10 years ago. It was also a rural community. It is notable this was in Canada and not the United States. Um, and I suspect that some American gun advocates will be immediately jumping on this and saying, oh, look, Canada, they've had a mass shooting. It proves gun control doesn't work. Um, that would be really premature. I mean, first point is no one has ever claimed that gun control will absolutely stop gun violence. I haven't heard anyone claim that. Um, but societies that do have stricter regulations, as I understand Canada does, I will say I believe the rate of gun ownership in Canada is higher than the UK. Um, and there may be a lot of reasons for this. Canada's a much bigger country. It's got large swathes of rural areas compared to the UK, which is quite urban. Um, so in that sense, Canada is a similar sort of demographic constitution to the American Midwest, I would say, where there's also high gun ownership. But the regulations are stricter in Canada, which makes incidents like this rare. I mean, the last time you have to go back to 1989 to find an attack on this scale in Canada. That's not to say there isn't problems in its inner city areas. Like a lot of major cities around the world, they have gang problems. Um, but it doesn't compare to the sort of level of gun violence that goes on in the United States, where you get a massacre on this scale at least once a year, and you get numerous spree shootings every year. The point about Canada or the UK or Australia is when these things do happen, they're big news stories precisely because they are so rare. Um, there were some reports suggesting the gunman had been disgruntled because his business has been affected by the lockdown regulations. It may well be that we'll see social effects from this, from the lockdown around the world. We may well see social unrest rising. But I think that it's too early to say what sort of measures can be taken. I think, well, not too early. It should be looked at immediately. I mean, certainly in Australia, the famous case cited there is the Hobart Massacre, 1996, which was the same year as the Dunblane Massacre here in the UK. And in both cases, the government, in the British government and the Australian government, brought in sweeping legislation, which was widely supported by the public. In a free society, you're always going to have different opinions. So there will be some Canadians who are against further gun regulations, but I imagine many others will be for it. So it'll be interesting to see the response in Nova Scotia. Another example is in New Zealand, the terrorist attack last year in Christchurch, in which the attacker used guns and bombs. He was an Australian national, of course. That brought in a debate on the New Zealand gun issue. So it is significant, it is notable when these things happen outside the United States because they're so frequent in the US. Germany, of course, had a massacre earlier this year, and Thailand. So 2020 is really shaping up to be, I mean, that's the third mass shooting this year in countries that are not in war zones. Thailand, Germany, and now in Canada. In the case of Germany, that was a far right terror attack. It looks like this case, it was a guy who, as a statement would go, going postal. It sounds like he had a grievance with his ex-wife and he just flipped, basically. It's an awful event. And my heart goes out to all those involved. I wonder how they're going to go about it in terms of the funerals and so on. I imagine the Trudeau government will lift some restrictions because this is an exceptional situation. Um, I imagine they will lift some restrictions and allow people to attend the funerals. But this is like a double whammy. Canada, like every country, is already battling coronavirus, so it's really sad. Anyway, yeah, let's just hope this doesn't become a regular event, and there's no indication it will in Canada. This is a dark day for the country. And it was really over 2 days. Like I say, the gunman was shot on the Sunday morning in a place called Enfield. So he travelled some distance. I don't know how far that is from Port Peak, but clearly he travelled, and that's why I compared to the Cumbria shootings. Likewise, that didn't all take place in one location. In that case, the gunman Derek Bird travelled between several hamlets in his rampage. And in the case of the Cumbria shooting, again, that was in a rural area where within the UK there will be slightly higher gun ownership because farmers there. Nevertheless, we do have very, very tight gun regulations in this country, supported by the vast majority of the public. And I'm not trying to make any political statement with this, it's just notable.